The first story, the fireball. At the time of this story, I was probably 12 years old. I can't say for sure. I have an aunt, my mom's sister, who lives in the same city as us, but in a different neighborhood, in fact. On the other side of town, even by car, which takes an hour to get there. One day, she called us around 12 a.m., and given that she usually goes to bed at 9 o'clock, it immediately became clear that we shouldn't expect good news. My mother answered the phone, and her dialogue with my aunt made not only me, but also my father scared. In short, she called because there was a huge fireball hanging in front of her window. She lives on the 8th floor. It's straight with clear edges, burning so that it lights up not only the apartment, but also the yard. It hangs literally a few meters from the window and seems to shimmer or pulsate a bit. My aunt woke up from the bright light when it appeared. She lives alone, and she called because she was scared. It seemed to her that the ball or something in the ball was just looking at her. The aunt went to the window in the other room, from which the balloon was a little further away, and looked out into the yard. It turned out that the balloon was definitely not a glitch, because people were leaning out of the windows of the house, and some had already run outside. Everyone, of course, was staring at the balloon. It stayed there for about 20 minutes. All this time, my aunt was on the phone with my mom. Then it abruptly took off and flew vertically into the night sky. It was around 2002. There were hardly any phones with cameras, at least not in our country. And there was no normal internet either. Maybe someone took a picture of the balloon back then, but I haven't heard about it. By the way, a long time ago, when I remembered this story, I even found an article about it online in one of the local newspapers. Now I can't find it, as if all the information about the bullet has disappeared. The second story, the black scarecrow. My wife, although we didn't know each other at the time, but it doesn't matter, used to work as a medical registrar at the central ambulance station. Ambulance doctors would bring them patient records, and the registrars would enter all this data into a computer. This is one such card we will discuss for your understanding. Doctors are obliged to write down all the patient's complaints in the card, even if they are talking nonsense. Therefore, it is possible to understand what the doctor actually faced from the card. That time, the story turned out to be worse than ever later. By the way, the doctor who described it all told his colleagues at the station it was a simple call. A man was sick, no details. Upon arrival, it turned out that the ambulance had been called by his wife. She came home from work and found her husband on the floor. He says he woke up after a day he works as a lifeguard. 8. Went back to the bedroom, and there literally a black scarecrow is sitting on the bed in the corner and giving birth. The man is sitting in the kitchen, frantic, and his wife is calming him down. Of course, she doesn't see anything in the bedroom. She says that her husband doesn't drink at all, not even on holidays, and she has never noticed anything like this before. The doctor examined the patient, looked around the room. Although it sounds strange, everything is normal. He thinks that he should ask the man to look again. But even if he sees this scarecrow again, he doesn't know what to do with him. An ordinary doctor cannot take him to a mental hospital unless he calls a special team. But the man is adequate. He communicates normally. He is just scared. And what can they do with him? Anyway, I decided to check again. He enters the bedroom first, leading the man with him. The man looks at the bed, shouts something like "it sees me," and runs out of the apartment at sprint speed. The wife is shocked. The doctor doesn't know what's going on and what he should do now. In the end, he wrote in the chart that the patient had run away. The driver, who stayed outside in his car, said he saw a man running out of the entrance with only his slippers on and disappearing around the corner. No one knows what happened to this guy after that. And how would you know? The doctor went to the next call, filled out a card, and gave it to the statistics. No one saw that man in that house again. The third story, grandfather. This case is from the category of false memories, or the local Mandela effect, or maybe it all really happened, but unfortunately, I'm unlikely to find out that my maternal grandmother died when I was about 4 years old. She lived in a different city, but in the same region. So we often visited her. Strangely enough, I remember these trips perfectly, down to the smallest detail. For example, I remember her house, the entrance, and her apartment very well, how we knocked on her window when we arrived, because for some reason she didn't have a bell and she lived on the ground floor. I remember sitting on an old Soviet sofa in her room and playing with my grandfather, how I would climb on his lap and then beg my grandparents for dried berries, raspberries. I think that were in a box on the closet. My mother scolded me, saying that there was no need to beg. But my grandfather smiled. My grandmother waved her hand, saying, "What can you get out of him?" And they would get me this box, and I would chew on the berries, and I liked them wildly. I don't remember how my grandparents died. It's strange, but I don't remember at all. Although my mother says that on the day of my grandmother's death, I visited her with my parents. Probably the child's brain blocked unpleasant memories, but I still remember my grandmother's kind face and my grandfather's smile. But if there were no strangeness here, I would not be writing this now. For some reason, my parents and I didn't talk much about my grandparents, but one day we did. I was already in my 20s at the time. I just remembered this box of berries and told my mom. She confirmed that yes, it was true. Even at that time, I was still speaking incomprehensibly. But I was begging for berries, but my grandfather died before I was born. Honestly, when I heard that, I couldn't believe it. As trite as it may sound, I remember him clearly and distinctly, not just the image, but how I played with him, sat on his lap, a lot of things. But no, he really died a few years before I was born. My mom and dad say that my grandmother was always alone, and I could not see any other people in her apartment. That's the way it was. Maybe it doesn't sound as strange, but when you have such clear memories, even if they are childhood ones, and then it turns out that it didn't happen and couldn't have happened, then you feel some kind of emptiness inside. I don't know. I still believe that it was really my grandfather. And even if I was the only one who saw him then,